This is Insight with Zaid, and welcome to my podcast. I asked my listeners to send me a list of questions on their concerns around AI and how AI would impact their lives. And I received 6 questions from around the world, and I want to go through it. The questions and answers, and then some of my insights around it. Some of it, granted, is aspirational, but if we need to make certain that AI works for everybody and that it is something that everybody can use and it doesn't become dangerous, some of these things will have to be implemented. Like I said, it's aspirational. We live in a world where countries don't really get along with one another, and my expectation is when it comes to governance of AI, countries are not all going to fall into line by trying or by agreeing to certain governance rules and ethics. So let's get into the questions. Question 1. What are the most effective ways for individuals to safeguard their privacy against AI-driven surveillance? The idea around the best way to safeguard your data and yourself against AI surveillance is to encrypt your data. So there's encryption tools which obscures data, which makes certain that whatever somebody tries to get into or tries to see or tries to take, the data, they won't be able to get to it, because it makes it unreadable and authorized, and it doesn't authorize humans to be able to read what you're trying to do. This provides a stronger layer of security on any conversations you may have online with anybody. And the idea around that is to make certain that you do have your encryption in place. A regular update privacy settings on your, and then one of the other things that you can do is regularly update your privacy settings on your social media and other online platforms. What I see is that people don't actually do that. They leave their privacy settings as is, and if you regularly update it, you're basically making certain that you are safe from any AI intrusion. Companies often change privacy laws and settings, potentially exposing more information than is intended. The insight around this is proactive management of these settings can proactively or significantly reduce one's digital footprint. And the idea around this is you need to reduce your digital footprint. Unfortunately, we're getting into a situation where your digital footprint is actually growing. But with the advent of AI, it is going to become more at risk. So one of two things you can do is either reduce your footprint or put in place encryption data tools and make sure that your settings are updated on a regular basis to ensure that your data is safe. Also, educate yourself as to what AI can and cannot do. What its capabilities are and what its limitations are. Now, I know the difficulty around that is that if you're unaware of AI and what it is doing and what it can produce, it's very difficult for you to educate yourself on it. My advice to you is to get more involved, to go out and understand, to look at, to read, to get online, to make certain that you are checking everything that is regarding AI. Purely because it is a safeguard against your data getting out there and potentially the ability for criminals using AI to scam you out of your hard-earned cash. So those knowledge will enable you to make informed decisions, and it can lead to better engagement also when you're dealing with AI in a productive environment. So question 2, this comes from James in Iowa. I have pronounced it correctly, right? How can consumers identify and protect themselves from AI-driven misinformation? Again, very, very difficult, but you need to critically evaluate the sources of information. Understand where the information is coming from, understand who's giving you this information. If you evaluate the credibility of the information source, you will then be able to make a decision for yourself whether the information that you're receiving is correct or whether the information you're receiving is incorrect. This skill will help you differentiate between legitimate news and the crap that is out there. And there's a ton of it at the moment. There's a whole lot of noise in the system online with people making claims and putting in information that really, really is not true. The problem with this is that it will require continuous learning. And if you're not an individual that is by nature somebody who goes out to seek information, by nature curious around what's happening around you, you're going to struggle with this. My advice to you is to get curious, to go out and investigate, because it will require you to do a lot of learning and adaptation to make sure that you're keeping up, because AI is going to evolve, and it's going to evolve more and more and more. And if you get left behind in its beginning stages where we are now, you're going to get to a point where you really don't know what's happening out in the world. And then there's many organizations that offer platforms and services to verify the accuracy of information. But again, you need expert knowledge to understand if the technology that you're using, if the platforms that you're using are firstly implemented correctly and it's giving you what you're looking for. And that's where the problem comes along, because there's a reliance then on fact-checking services to make certain that what you're getting is correct. Of course, you can bury your head in the sand and make as if the world, as if nothing's happening. That's not quite going to work out, because again, you run the risk of exposing yourself and putting yourself into danger. And then diversifying information channels. So consume information from a variety of channels. I know the laziness of individuals is that you find one channel which gives you all the information, and that's the channel you stick to. It has been proven that if you take mainstream media, your Sky News, your CNNs and the like, for years they've been sprouting information which is specific to their own biasness, which is specific to whoever owns those environments and what information can go out. We have known for years, for example, that mainstream media will report on a situation in one way and report in the situation positively in one way and then negatively on another. Again, I use the example of what's happening out in the Middle East. If you look at some of the narrative that has been coming out, it has all been skewed in favor of one entity compared to what is actually happening on the ground. I see now, with the amount of noise that is happening out there and the amount of pushback, that the likes of CNN are beginning to change their narrative. But initially what used to happen was they would have to send their news bulletins to a bureau who would then check that information and basically make changes to that information. So they couldn't report in the way they wanted to report. They had to report on how they were told to report, which makes the concept of fair news really a bunch of crap. So my suggestion to you is, firstly, if you do look at mainstream media, is go online. Because mainstream media, if you look at what's happening up again in Gaza, mainstream media has been very biased in the way they've approached certain things. And they also haven't shown everything. And the only reason why what is happening up there at the moment is in the news is because of social media. If social media didn't exist, 90%, I guarantee you, 90% of what's happening up in Gaza would not be reported. So be careful where you consume your information from. It is very, very important. And the idea also is that if you do from different media outlets or from different areas in where you get the information, basically what happens is that you'll then be exposed to different viewpoints. And being exposed to different viewpoints encourages critical thinking and comparative analysis. My editor's going to kill me. I promised in no big words, and I've just used big words at the moment. But the most important thing again is, even though I'm saying go to various different areas to get your information, make sure that the areas you're getting your information from or the sources you're getting your information from is actually reputable and reliable. You're not going to go listen to somebody, Honest Joe's media reports and take that as face value. And unfortunately, because people assume it's online, because people assume it's in the news, it has to be right. And you need to be able to take in information, assimilate it through critical thinking, make a decision on your own whether it's actually true or not. It's the same thing when it happens, for example, on deep fakes. If you look at the Elon Musk situation, and that's a video that I did in the past, where he has according to the YouTube, he has a cryptocurrency platform, and he is offering it to people and saying, well, invest in it and you'll never have to work again. Any gullible person who'd look at it and say, okay, so it's Elon Musk, so therefore it must be correct. And that's what I'm trying to get across, is just be very careful who you trust and what information you actually assimilate and what information you take on and what information you deem to be accurate and correct. So from Susie down in Hawaii, hello, always wanted to go to Hawaii. I think it's a lovely state. Love to visit one day. In what ways can individual contribute to ethical AI development and usage? Now, this is very, very difficult. The aspirational side of me is saying, well, only support organizations that have ethical AI practices. Because what will happen is that you will then force every organizations within the world to basically have ethical practices. And if they don't have ethical practices, you then vote with your buying power. And by not buying that company's services or goods, will force them to encourage and to adopt ethical AI practices. So it's how you support those organizations that basically will dictate whether they implement ethical practices or whether they don't. And what will happen is that if you do then enforce it, it will encourage businesses to adopt transparent and responsible AI practices. And currently at this moment in time, I don't believe that adoption of ethical and responsible AI practices is high on any organization's priority list. They have bigger priorities. AI is just busy coming in. I don't even think they're looking at it properly at the moment. A lot of organizations don't have an individual responsible for AI in the organization. They've given it to the CIO, given it to the CTO, which tells you that at this moment in time, because it's still in its infancy, organizations has not put it on its priority list. The other thing that you can do is you can participate in public discourse and policy making. Very, very difficult. If you can't get government policy makers to make decisions and to put something in place, if you can't get organizations to make decisions and put something in place, you as Joe Public, even though you've set up some sort of public policy decision-making forum, it's very difficult for you to drive your narrative in saying, listen, guys, you have to implement ethical practices. The governments of the world do not all agree with one another. So putting it in at a governmental level or a state level is not going to happen. And I'll give you an example. If the United States comes with ethical practices, and these are the governance on how you rule artificial intelligence, China or Russia, for example, may turn around and say, no, hang on, we're not going to adopt that. Who are you to tell us? And that's when the issue is going to come along. So if you can't get that global bodies to start talking with one voice, it's going to be very difficult for you as an individual, no matter how big your group is, to be able to push the narrative. But it's something that, again, from my part, being aspirational, it is something that you're going to have to get involved with if you want to ensure that there is ethical practices around the use of AI, the implementation of AI. And obviously, if you are engaged, and it will keep you informed of what's actually happening and what companies are busy putting out there. So, for example, I mean, we went from ChatGPT 3 to ChatGPT 4, and the ability of ChatGPT 4 to do certain things that ChatGPT 3 couldn't do is astronomical. The problem with that is that it was released, I think, 2 years too early or a year too early. So the pace of AI is gathering at an alarming rate. And with no governance or framework in which to operate in, it's just going to continue. And the idea around that is twofold. One is it's the brainchild of an individual, and they think they're doing great. But secondly, it's chasing the dollar. You know, everybody wants to be in the next Elon Musk. Everybody wants to be in the next Mark Zuckerberg, and they all want to be billionaires and utilizing AI or creating AI that the world uses is going to get them to that status, that billionaire status. Sam Altman, for example, I didn't know who Sam Altman was until ChatGPT came along, and I'm sure he's making a ton of money at the moment. So if you are part of the social movement, you know what he's doing. You read up on what the organization, what their companies are doing. And if things are not going according to what you think it should be, you can raise your voice and you can say, hey, you can't do that. Write to your representative in government and say, listen, well, you need to take up the fight. Again, my worry is that it's too far down on the priority list of things that needs to be done. I mean, we're talking climate change, et cetera, that it could get lost in the wash, or it could be at the bottom of the in tray before somebody gets to it. But knowledge is power, and if you educate yourself, you can either make a difference, or you can protect yourself, which is important. So question 4, and this comes out of LA. What's your name? James? Yeah. So James from LA asks, what are the implications of AI in the workplace, and how can employees prepare? Yes, we've all heard the news, we've all read about it, we've all seen it on social media, we've even seen it in mainstream media, where the doomsday prediction is that AI is going to come along and take your job, and it's going to replace you. In a sense, in certain areas, yes, AI can replace you as an individual, especially on certain tasks. The initial thought was that it would be low-level jobs that would be replaced, but it's actually high-level jobs that's been replaced. I'll give you an example. An organization up in Europe somewhere, I think it was Europe, and this, I don't know how true it is, but it's something that I investigated. They put they made ChatGPT as their CEO, and the organization's profit increased by 20%. Now, I think that's a load of crap, because there's certain things that irrespective of whether it is AI or human, AI can do certain things and humans can do certain things, and I'll get to it now when I give you my insights. I really don't believe that could be the case. But again, hey, what do I know? It's, again, information out in the digital world, and you see it, you consume it, you analyze it, and you apply critical thinking. And it either could be true or it could not, and you just need to do a whole lot of research. Unfortunately, I don't have a big research team, so I have to do a lot of research myself. But the way you can get to working or preparing yourself in the workplace is upskill yourself in AI-related fields. The more knowledge, the more skills you have, the more difficult it is going to be to replace you with an AI. So if you do continuous learning in AI, data analysis, and related tech fields, you can secure yourself in the evolving job market. And then, more importantly, and I think people don't really understand it, is understanding AI tools and how they can augment your job and allow you to work side by side with ChatGPT, with artificial intelligence. And when I say side by side, I'm not talking about a robot working with you. I'm talking about the implementation of artificial intelligence in your organization, and how, based on the fact that you understand the tools quite well, you can then work side by side with it. And it's not competing. It's more around leveraging as to how you work together to add productivity in the workplace. If you up in your productivity and you're using AI to do so, the organization is not going to get rid of you. Well, I hope they're not going to get rid of you. But ideally what's going to happen is that they're going to find then something else for you to do in the organization if it's a mundane task that AI could do. And then most importantly, and this is where people really, really struggle, you need to accept change. And I know it's difficult, people struggle to accept change, but you also need to foster adaptability and creativity. And the important thing around this is that where people actually get it wrong is that they assume AI can replace you 100%. This is not Skynet. This is not Arnold Schwarzenegger coming and taking over everything. What AI cannot do is that AI does not have creativity and emotional intelligence. It may have problem-solving skills, but the problem-solving skills is based on what it has been fed and the data it has been fed. And there's a certain biasness in that. And I'll cover biasness in another video. It's going to be very, very interesting. So there is uniquely human traits and behaviors that AI, no matter what, even if it does become sentient, cannot replicate. And that is where it's very, very difficult for people to say, well, AI is going to completely take over everything. Yes, organizations would love AI to completely take over everything. And the reason why I say that is that probably the biggest outlay of any organization would be in salaries. So if you reduce your salary bill, you can drive up profits. If you're driving up profits by using AI, the idea then is that you're making more money for yourself and your shareholders, to the detriment of the community. What organizations don't understand is that in paying a salary to somebody like me, I support a whole lot of other business in my economy by going through to the local spa down the road, or the takeaway, the clothing shop, the retail environments, the petrol for my car. So I'm supporting an economy, and if I don't have that income, I don't support that economy. And by definition, that economy that I'm supporting then supports their families, and on and on and on. So you have this greater whole just based on one salary. Take away the people out of an organization, where the problem then comes along is that there is no money in the system, and with no money in the system, businesses will fold. So we're not yet at the Skynet level, but I think we're still far off. Hopefully by the time that comes along, if at all, I won't be around to see it. And again, we go back to encouraging a culture of continuous learning. Now, I hated school. I'll do a video around that one of these years. Did very, very badly at school. But when I left, I realized that for me to succeed in this world, I would need a higher education. So I went and I did a Bachelor of Science part-time, and I went and I did an MBA once I graduated with my Bachelor of Science. So for somebody who hated school, I've literally added another 14 years, I think it was. Could be 5 plus another 7, 8 years, maybe 9, of additional education. And those are just your mainstream degrees and diplomas. There's a whole lot of other certification courses that I've done. I've done things around learning how to do YouTube, how to set up this, and how to shoot videos. So there's been a continuous learning. And I got involved in AI because I wanted to understand what it does. So my point to you is you need to foster a culture of continuous learning and the ability to adapt within your organization to prepare teams for future use and AI integration. And again, you need to advocate for ethical AI use. And this is within your own organization. And I know this is where it can become tricky, because you may not want to rock the boat because you're scared they're going to throw you out of the door. And I'm not saying go ahead and be destructive about it where you could lose your job. All I'm saying is that when you see AI in the organization being used, question the ethicalness of it if it doesn't make sense to you. But ask the questions politely. Again, like I said, I do not want you to lose your job. But you can influence how AI is adopted in your organization, especially depending on how far up the management pole you are, but not necessarily only at management level, at grassroots level within an organization. And the millennium kids that's coming out today are a lot more outspoken, and they're a lot more curious about what's happening around them. They're not scared to take on the hierarchy within the organization. I remember when I started working, I was terrified of speaking to my manager and saying something out of turn. Kids nowadays would walk up to the CEO and give him a piece of their mind with unsolicited information. And it just makes us marvel at the fact that there seems to be no fear in the generation that's coming through. And then, again, like I said, participate in discussions internally in your organization, in your broader sphere with friends, etc., and then in the world, and participate in those conversations, because what's going to happen is it gives you the opportunity to not only learn but also to drive the narrative. They do say good debates leads to a greater understanding, congruency, and then both of you walk away with a higher understanding of where you started. So it's very, very important to debate these things. And then be proactive in understanding the ethical dimensions of AI. It can also help you mitigate potential biases and unfair outcomes. Again, like I said, it is something that I will talk about around bias, and you'll actually be surprised around some of the information that I do give you. And then the final question, and this comes from Gary out in Washington. Is it Gary? Jerry. My apologies, Jerry out in Washington. How can individuals protect themselves from AI-driven identity theft and fraud? Previous video I did was around deepfake and understanding how to spot deepfake. So those are one of the areas. Go and have a look at that video. It gives you a whole breakdown of I think I gave something like 3 to 8 tips or something to that effect, how to spot the deepfake and make certain that you protect yourself. But there's also other ways of doing it is by using advanced security measures. Now, your advanced security measures is not necessarily only within the organization. I mean, I'm using the laptop at the moment that's connected to the Wi-Fi, and I have security measures implemented on this particular machine to make certain that I don't get viruses and phishing scams, etc. From an AI perspective, I'm investigating technology that I can implement on my system to make certain, and it's not that there's no guarantee, there's no 100% guarantee in this world. But the idea is to make certain that I protect myself to a certain point. And probably the intended consequences of AI, I don't think it's unintended, because the world would have learned from the implementation of computers and creating packages to protect against viruses and phishing scams. The intended consequences of artificial intelligence and the implementation thereof is the creation of tools to monitor and protect against false information that is generated by AI or malicious outcomes that AI can do. So there's going to be a whole industry, and it started already, where individuals are actually going to start developing technology to police and manage AI. And that's going to be very, very important. Importantly, again, is in your own world, implement multi-factor authentication, and then also make sure that you change your password regularly. I'm guilty of it. Is that sometimes what happens is I'll use one password across multiple platforms. It's very difficult to keep track of his password, and especially if you don't log into certain areas on a regular basis, you could easily lose your password. There is technology that you can utilize that will store your passwords for you, that only you have access to. I'm very, very reticent on putting all my passwords in one place where somebody could eventually hack it, and then I'm totally screwed. So again, one of the things that I don't do, and it's something that I've now started to do regularly, is monitor your personal bank account. So do it regularly. I can remember in the good old days when we used to get paper statements. It would come in the mail. I wouldn't even bother to open it. I'd tear it up and I'll throw it into the dustbin. Now that we do everything online, you have access to your account and you can actually see the transactions that you've done. My suggestions to you is to go out, have a look on a regular basis, is have a look at your account and make sure that you're tracking what transactions is going through your account so that you know what you're spending. And if you do come across something that doesn't make sense, you can always contact your bank and ask them, hey, where did this transaction come from? It's happened to me on a few occasions. I've canceled subscriptions, and what unscrupulous organizations do, they wait a year because they still have my details, and it's very difficult for me to get my credit card details off their system. So they have my details, and a year or two later, all of a sudden, transactions start going off. It happened to me this year, where transactions started happening in November, December, January. I only picked up on it in February, and I contacted them, and they came up with a silly excuse. No, it's a recurring subscription. And I said, well, when was the subscription initiated? And they said, no, it was initiated 2 years ago. And I said, well, then rubbish. There's no ways I would have let the recurring subscription keep going. And if you're saying 2 years, why did it then only start in November of last year? So again, be very, very careful, is that you could cancel something, but what they do is they push it through. And if they don't hear from you, then all of a sudden they're getting something from you for nothing. And then if you do make a complaint, it's, oh, my apologies, we made a mistake, they refund you. And what they did was they refund me for 1 month, and the other 2 months they basically got away with. So again, be very careful. Always make sure that you're aware of what's happening in your personal banking accounts and your personal finances. And then again, is always limit personal information that you share online. Now, I know when you're doing online transactions, you've got to fill in all this information. You've got to put in credit card details. I think some of the platforms, what they're doing now is that when you put in your credit card details, there's a box that you can check that they ask you to tick if you want to make payment easier in future. So it keeps your credit card details on the platform. What I do is if I need to buy something online, I purchase it, but I make certain that I don't tick the box that says keep your card online. What I'm also doing now is I'm becoming a lot more discerning on what I do online and what I purchase online. And if they don't have the facility to cancel the card or not retain the card, I then don't purchase from that organization. So what happens is, and yes, it's a pain, it's a ball ache, because you've got to keep entering your information every time you go back to that website or that merchant. But 9 times out of 10, you're not going to do it on a regular basis. For example, the only thing I do on a regular basis is my ChatGPT subscription and 1 or 2 AI subscriptions that I keep on a regular basis. Everything else is one-off, and then I stop making, and then I make certain that my details is not on the system. The other way you can do it is if you're using your credit card, is every now and then your credit card does expire, but every now and then get to a point where maybe a year or two from you. So if your credit card expires in 5 years, on a yearly basis or every second year, then apply for another credit card. Because then you'll get a new credit card number, you get a new CCV, I can't remember, code that you need to put on the back of the card. What happens then is that even if they do have your credit card details from 2 or 3 years ago, it won't go through because the card is no longer active and you can use your new card. And then the idea around that is if you have less personal information, it's less likely that they can steal your information and then use phishing techniques to be able to get to you. This is very, very difficult because I am involved in social media, because I'm involved as a YouTube creator. I'm very active on social media. But if you are not involved to that extent, then minimize your involvement in social media. Now, I know you're going to tell me, hang on, because you're on your Facebook and your TikToks and your Instagrams and your YouTubes and your LinkedIn's and your whatever else is out there, it then becomes very difficult for you to limit what you're doing across social media. All I'm saying is be very careful. Firstly, what information you share. I've seen people put their telephone numbers on their social media platforms and make it available to everybody. Yes, you need to put your telephone numbers on now because it's becoming the norm and it's something that they can do to verify you. The idea around that is when you do put your telephone number on social media is to hide it and make it visible only to yourself. Obviously, if you're using social media as a business and you need your business telephone number out there, that is perfectly acceptable. Again, staying informed about the latest driven AI scams, very, very difficult because if you're not doing research around it or you're not reading or you're not part of global, what's the word I'm looking for, subscriptions. If you have not subscribed to global subscriptions, it's very difficult to know what kind of AI scams is out there. But people generally talk. Somebody will tell you, oh, there was this particular scam, so take note of it. If you're on social media and they mention it in their posts, take note of it. If you're not physically doing your own investigation. And then finally, this is from Susie in Thailand. Hello, Susie. How are you? I'm starting to visit Thailand. I'd love to. How can society ensure AI benefits everyone rather than creating inequalities? And so, Susie, the biggest, with that particular question, there's always going to be inequalities, unfortunately. If you look at the current stats, I think 80% of the world's wealth is owned by 1% of the world's population. The 3 richest men in America, in Bezos, Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk, earn or own an obscene amount of money. And if you look at the rest of America, I mean, there's just no comparison. So the difficulty in saying, well, how do we ensure equality in the use of AI? Again, it's based on including diverse perspective around AI development. Now, I know this is very, very difficult. For example, I can't go to Sam Altman and tell him how to develop AI. Firstly, he's going to tell me who the hell am I? And secondly, he's going to tell me to fly a kite. That is, if I even manage to get an audience with him or even solicit an answer from him. So it's very, very difficult to say, well, okay, I want to put in my 2 cents worth as to how you need to create AI. And then there's the other thing is collaboration between technologists, social scientists, ethicists, and community representatives can lead to more socially responsible AI. That, again, is from my perspective where I'm saying that's what we need to go to. Whether that's going to happen, I seriously doubt it. It will happen on smaller scales in fragmented scenarios. And until there's a movement that kind of that everybody goes in the same direction, I seriously doubt that's going to happen. But ideally, what should happen is something that everybody should aspire to, is make sure there's inclusive design considerations, which includes race, gender, age, abilities, and other factors. Because if you have that inclusivity, okay, ideally what should happen is that it should cover every aspect of the human race, every aspect, irrespective of whether you are rich or poor, young or old, black or white. It really, really doesn't matter. And the idea is, just remember, AI is data driven. So the data you feed it is what you're going to receive back. Again, like I said, until it becomes sentient and it starts thinking for itself, it's going to be very difficult for AI to get to a particular point where the information you're getting is not tainted by some biasness. And again, it's something that I will talk about in my next video. And then enforcing strict regulatory standards. Again, it goes back to my previous comments where governments can't work together. For example, if some government came out and said, you must do it this way, my comments would be, well, okay, so who are you to tell me what I must do? And that's where the difficulty comes in. People in different parts of the world, unless they are part of the Western nations, part of Europe, etc., and they all fall under kind of one thinking type of thing, it's not going to happen. Again, and I point to countries currently that do not even speak to one another or like one another. They are not going to listen to one another, and that's where the issue comes in. It's going to be very difficult to enforce strict regulatory standards. I mean, they tried to regulate the internet, if I'm not mistaken, and that didn't happen. So it's going to be very difficult to, in my opinion, to regulate AI. I know they started something in South Africa. There was some forum that started, and the first thing that went through my mind is, well, who died and elected you president of the country? So it's that type of thinking that becomes very, very difficult. But governments can, and international bodies can play a critical role in this. My worry is that if you look at what's happening in the UN again, is everybody votes and then one country puts up their hand and they veto the vote. So they can't even decide on one thing, for example, like stopping a war. Do you really think they're going to have consensus around how we need to govern AI? So I know the responses I'm giving you, Susie, is not exactly what you're looking for, but I'm just kind of trying to, what I'm giving you is the ideal from my part, but the reality on the ground is a lot different. And you need a robust legal framework. But again, who's going to implement that legal framework? Is it some world court, world body, governance body that's probably sitting in The Hague somewhere? I don't know. That's going to try and implement this. Well, you can't even get those bodies to enforce the policies that they put in play. And again, I don't want to talk about what's happening up in Gaza. And then promoting AI literacy and ethical education. So again, it goes back to educate yourself. If you are not educated, you're going to struggle. And that's where the issue comes in. And to me, very, very important is the education system. You need to integrate AI into the education curriculum. Now, I'm busy setting up a podcast with a teacher to discuss this. The biggest issues that universities and schools have at the moment is students using AI and not actually thinking for themselves and producing work that is AI generated. The argument to that point then is that if you're going to deny the use of AI in learning institutions, how do you add AI to the curriculum? I think there's a sweet spot for both. And yes, there's going to be an issues either way outside of that sweet spot. But you have to embrace AI at all levels, and that is included in our education system. And how you monitor and how you police it is going to be something that would have to be thought out going forward. AI is not going to go away. Guys, it's here to stay. And you need to ensure that you then embrace it, and how you embrace it is how you can then utilize it. So look out for that video, look out for that podcast, which I think is going to be great. So there you have it, guys. 6 questions from all over the world on how you can protect yourself against AI and the use of AI. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please do me a favor, smash a like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. It takes you less than a minute, in fact, less than a few seconds. But what it does do is that it helps my channel with the algorithm, and it allows me to keep bringing you content like this. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I really appreciate it. Cheers.